talking about already this one, like API managers and ASP applying the right policy for the APIs and applying already the performance for the APIs itself. So the criticality from end-to-end IoT use cases is coming from already different components, and all of this component is already communicating with different protocols, with different integration options. So when we are thinking about already security in IoT, we should think already of starting from device till the application layer. In the automotive industry, actually, there are a high risk, actually, because most of already use cases now and automotive industry is moving from just normal tracking for the vehicles itself to be a controlling the vehicles itself. So it's now we are talking about already life of people, life of human, actually. So security is very critical now. And now we are talking about the car sharing. So each car it should be already available, like already you drive and already e-car which is already spread everywhere. So you have to access the car itself. So if you don't apply a right security rules, it can be accessible for anyone.
So securing the endpoints, what you mean is a very important part between all the components starting from any IoT device and then the data being transmitted from the IoT device to the staging stage and then going to a data warehouse ultimately to go ahead and do a reporting data. But what about the live feed for some of these, where you see, what in modern technology we also use certain kind of, communication between drones or certain kind of communication which is happening through the IoT devices which are more vulnerable in nature. So again, endpoint security is one, but tampering with the device itself, how do you alert people? How do you suggest we can alert, the person who is controlling it? Any security practices maybe you would like to also go ahead and pitch in on top of it?
I think Abiola, you can add something here.
Definitely. All right. Thank you very much for that question. So, simply put, when you want to bring up the IoT device, so the first thing you need to actually implement are the frameworks, right? The security frameworks. So we have a couple of security frameworks, because if you don't put like a framework in place, how are you expected to be able to comply, or what are the requirements for you to do your compliance with, which is very important for an organization. So right, we have a couple of frameworks. So for the IoT, we have the International Standard Organization framework for IoT, basically, which is the 31141 framework, where it actually defines how you, so there are three parts into it. So we have the conceptualization model, okay, we have the reference model, and we have the reference architecture. So it simply tells you how you're supposed to put the IoT concept in place. So we have the reference talks about the trustworthiness of your IoT. So things like confidentiality, things like integrity, availability, okay, how you protect the personal identity of whatever devices or whatever information or data is being transferred. And in terms of the architecture model, we're talking about the network connectivity. We're talking about the operability of the devices. So a couple of things that you need to put in place. And how do you put that in place is to set a policy for it, right, from an organization standpoint. And that's in terms of how the IoT devices are supposed to be in place, right? But in terms of the cybersecurity policies, we have the likes of ISO 27001, where we have about 14 domains within ISO 27001. Now, for the 14 domains, we have a couple of controls in place, about 114 controls in place, where the organization is supposed to identify standpoints or the domains within e.g. your assets management. So for IoT devices, we see them as assets, right? How is the organization supposed to what are the controls the organization is supposed to put in place to protect such devices, right? We'll talk about when the life cycle of a device from acquire to retire. So how do you retire the device at the end of the day? So that's ISO 27001. We have another framework, which is the NIST framework for cybersecurity. Now, the NIST framework came into play when, from an executive order, when there's a need for us to put cybersecurity framework in place. So we have about 5 domains within that, where we have the identify. So the identify has to do with what are the risk management processes you put in place. So Kamal said something about identifying the risk and also how do you mitigate it. So it's like more like a risk assessment that you're supposed to do within the organization, identify all those risks that has to do with cybersecurity. Then in the protect model of the NIST frameworks. So protect has to do with what are the information security awareness you put in place, the training we put in place, because believe it or not, you can put a robust information security program in place, but the weakest point are the human elements, which, you know, the last presenter actually highlighted. So how do you prevent that? So it's detailed information security awareness for all the human elements, the employees, your suppliers, your customers. So also now put access control in place for the preventive. Now for the detective, we need to put a mechanism in place that even though you have a robust preventive measure in place, how do you detect if something goes wrong? So those mechanisms need to put in place, right? And also in terms of recover, so let's say for example there was an attack or a hack in your IoT devices. How do you recover? What are the plans you have in place, the procedures you have in place to recover from such attack, right? So those are the frameworks you need to put in place when you're setting up like a robust IoT device in your organization.
Excellent, Abiola. So to go ahead and make sure that, you know, we all are working on different components. But when I come to Ravi ultimately is taking care of an actual data and video conferencing information, your pictures, your actual data. So he has to come to every one of us to go ahead and make sure Cisco is securing his infrastructure. To come to for software development, he has to come to, again, for backend to API securing, he has to come to Abbas, right? Although you know 15 languages. But the point is, then IoT devices, you have to go back to, you know, Kamal's, and then for cybersecurity, you might have to go ahead and come back to Abiola, and how you can go ahead and, you know, implement those frameworks. And of course, as a GRCP person, I come over from the practice from data center, right? So my whole work has been in terms of making sure I'm securing not only data centers, but also using all of these gentlemen's different aspects of security, and then making sure we are delivering it ultimately to the application owners or to any of the product owners, proper secure base platform, so they can develop something which is more secure, as well as they can go ahead and make sure that the data is secured at rest as well as on the net. Now, what is your take on using all of these kind of technologies, and your point from the prospect of bringing your video conferencing system on the IoT devices, or in general how IoT can go ahead and be more secured in such cases?
I think that's a fantastic way to put, right? So, we build the final solutions for our customers, and as you rightly put, there's a lot of security from a data center perspective that we require. Because a lot of questions asked from my customers is, where is my data going to be stored when I'm doing these conferences? Where is my minutes that we generate through AI is actually stored? And these are all, definitely from a data security perspective, it is becoming imperative that, the protocols that we use to communicate to these IoT devices becomes very imperative. And further to it, what we also develop is a lot of technologies on the security front. So we have developed our own technology or innovation, which is called enterprise data cocooning, right? Where at an enterprise level, how can we secure all this data coming from all these things, right? So we connect to their conference rooms, to the IoT devices there. There's a lot of data that is coming up, and how do we secure that and put it in a place where somebody cannot go and hack it, right? So these are something that we're constantly innovating on. We're also taking a few patents on that as well. And when it comes to especially the conferencing and the IoT devices there, even though they have kind of a physical security already because they're from the office environment they have, but the problem comes when it comes to the home and how you do conferencing, let's say in a hybrid environment, right? And now, when it comes to that, the DDoS attacks that are being used. So what many hackers or especially people who create malwares is target these kind of devices at homes, right? Where you might be using a camera or something which you think is secure, but it can be used in a botnet and can create these DDoS attacks across the networks. And I think that's where we're also investing ourselves in. In fact, we are talking to a distributor in UK where they provide this kind of high-end secure devices at home, and we're trying to integrate with their
You are more than
solutions.
welcome to come to us also. You can also
Yeah, and yeah, it's a as you rightly put, it actually involves a lot of complexity, and I think we have enough technologies. So especially after COVID, after we see a lot of bombing happening across the conferences and all, you know, a lot of solutions have been invented. Like for example, end-to-end encryption, so that if somebody comes, you know, he will not be able to come in because he will not have the right keys to, put his video out and send it across to the things. So, and also from a secure point of view, we have created one of the world's most AI-powered secured meeting rooms, which is like no one can enter into those rooms. And the data that we create in these rooms is basically encrypted and stored in a very, very secure manner,
so
right?
data at rest is also encrypted. What type of encryption do you suggest to anybody, because you have been constantly using it in the current environment?
Yeah, so basically, there are a lot of encryptions we use, especially at data at rest. We use AES and those kind of encryptions right now. There is also, there a lot of encryption happens on the transit, where, for example, we want to, for example, you're doing using an IoT device, communicating your video to it. So what we take is that video is encrypted at the point of origin and then sent to it, and that's called end-to-end encryption. So we exchange these keys. So we use a lot of, again, for exchanging these keys, which are also secure, again, there are certain protocols that we use to exchange these keys so that
so the PKI infrastructure.
Yeah, the PKI
and then you go ahead and make sure that, you know, your
exactly.
handshake is happening and all those things.
And
So AEC 256 is definitely a very strong encryption, but nowadays they are going on a higher level also.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about it that you can go on a higher level? It will definitely hit your performance. We know that encryption hits the performance, as well as when you talk from ISO 27001 perspective. I have seen a lot of companies when I do audits also. So I see a lot of companies in their statement of applicability, they go ahead and minus out 10.1 and 2 if it is not required as part of the controls when you put in ISO 27001. Why the reason is because what any of these companies, when they go ahead and use it on net, when they are encrypting it, even they do have the end-to-end encryptions from the, or on endpoints they have encryption, because it hits the performance of the software very largely. And I have actually tested 7 or 8 years back when I was in US in GSK. To be very precise, I applied encryption on my open systems on all the data at rest, and it hit me around, more than 80% of the time was increased automatically in terms of transactions happening. So video compression and then encryption. So how does it happen? So you want to go ahead and make sure that if you have to deal with the performance and a trade-off between security and performance, so how do you go ahead and manage it?
It definitely is. So there are ways in which we kind of do this end-to-end encryption at a very, very, we don't use, for example, AES kind of technologies for that kind of encryption. There are basically kind of encryptions which would just change the, with a certain code, they change the pixels and kind of encrypt it and send it back. So that is the easiest format of encryptions that you can do to not affect the performance much. But yes, but at the end of the day, the server is always sending the things that is coming and forwarding it to the, so we call it as an SFU, right, where it's standard forwarding unit, where it takes up the video streams, audio streams, and just renders it to the other persons, right? Now, what happens is, because the encryption happens at the point of origin, and the decryption happens at the thing, the load is mostly on the systems that that you're looking at.
On both the systems.
Yeah, on both the systems, right? And that's where we use very, very subtle encryptions at that stage. And you're right in terms of protocols, right? For example, there's a lot of support for AES 256. For example, we use SQL servers and all that, so where it's available readily, right? Now, if you want to go for higher kind of encryptions, we need to wait, because I think it's more than enough right now with these technologies. As it can, as you rightly said, yes, there are systems, powerful systems enough to hack. In the future, going to hack this.
So but TD is going to become older now. Transparent data encryption
Yes,
is going to
yes.
become older going forward.
Yeah.
So moving back again to again to everybody in the forum out here. So lastly, I would like to go ahead and get comments from you, as well as any kind of participation, rather than questions, any kind of participation on this particular part where we talk about risk-based approach, because assets are increasing in IoT. When you talk about IoT, there are millions of IoT assets. If you go for smart cities, if you go for autonomous vehicles, if you design something for it, if you secure it, right? Now in such cases, what happens is that, you know what, you have to go ahead and do an asset-based, risk analysis. Now, usually we see that even if we are, I'm personally running the risk-related aspects in a data center or in one of the biggest telco in India. So how do we do is we group it because there is a limited number of assets. So we group those assets and we go ahead and do a risk-based analysis on them, and then we go ahead and do the RCB projects prioritization, that which particular risks need to be taken care of, which we can go ahead and mitigate, which we can accept at the end of the day. But from the prospect of IoT devices, there cannot be, a grouping of 1 million devices and the risk can be analyzed, because it has to be again based on the environment, again based on that position. Even one small, what you call is a traffic light where you have an IoT device installed in a smart city would differ from the other traffic light, and its risk would be different, right? It is near some different area, it is near some mall, it is near some, vulnerable position. So the risk factor definitely changes from that perspective. So there is an approach where you need to go ahead and divide them into different type of, groups, which would go ahead and lead to, small, medium and high risk in these 3 categories, and again subgrouping them and then taking that particular information out. So this is a risk-based approach for when you go ahead and do asset-based risk analysis or asset-based related risk profiling when you are doing it. Once we do that profiling, we see that, what is the vulnerability for any of these particular devices, IoT devices, and a grouping of those devices and subgrouping. And then we go ahead and decide on it that how do we go ahead and counter those particular, say for example, problems what have arrived. So your threat and vulnerability based assessments at the end of the day, when we go ahead and see in your softwares, in your, equipments, in maybe an application what you are generating, or from the network perspective and from the GRCP perspective, what we do on a usual basis. So penetration testing, security testing, and passing out all these particular portions, you all have to go ahead and make sure that, all components at every point in time would go ahead and work properly and they are secured. Then only we'll be able to go ahead and have a secure feature. This is the final take from my side, and any other comments are welcome.
Actually, we are facing this challenge and we're talking about the smart cities especially. We are working with many big customers, and they are requiring more than 20 use cases. 20 use cases means that already you have more than 20 vendor of devices. And sometimes already you have a 20 vendor of devices, and sometimes we have more than this, because in the specific use case, you maybe have a device from vendor and the gateway from another vendor and another device from this vendor to be able to provide the one use case. If we're talking about like smart parking or smart irrigation device, sometimes from vendor and there is a gateway from another vendor. So I think this is already a very critical one if we're talking about already the criticality of security, and your approach regarding grouping of the devices itself, it's very important. And if we can divide this based on vendor, because each vendor have his specific security rules and also his specific integration protocols, because some of vendors, they are using already TCP IP over HTTP, not using HTTPS, sometimes already using MQTT. So grouping by the vendor, it's a very important thing, because we have a different vendors, how we can manage vendors, how we can make sure that already the vendors are applying the security from the device itself is already one aspect. And another aspect regarding the use case itself. We have some use cases we just reading the data, just monitoring the data. If we're talking about already environmental monitoring, just already read the data. It's already, the device, it's a lower risk than another device can do the action. Like already, if I have already smart parking, so the gate, we should already send the command for the gate itself to close or open. So another aspect regarding the use case, it's the criticality of the use case itself. Another use cases we're talking about already is the smart mobility one, and we are now, most of already smart mobility guys is using campus. As campus already is, we are connecting this campus over the protocol of car itself. So we can read the data from the car, and some use cases we can already also not read, already write already. So we can send a command for the car, stop engine, do already AC on and off. So the another aspect from vendor is already it's a use case itself. So we can divide it already high, medium, low, and critical based on the use case itself. And using this grouping, as you mentioned, based on different aspects of security, vendors, and the use case, it will help us already from the layer of management as managing already different vendors and different use cases will help us already to apply the right already security rules over these use cases. Yeah. And the most critical one already regarding the smart city now, most of already customers is using the IoT to operate the city. And now we are talking about operation of the city. And if we are talking about hacking or any security concern, actually it will affect our lives. Yeah, we are engaging with many customers. They are seeking for the operation center for the city actually. So I want already proposing with some solutions. I can imagine if any hacker can access this already platform and access this device, it will be a very, very critical issue. So security in the IoT is very important, especially with pressure from the customers to be already not just already monitoring. Actually, we are using this IoT applications to manage our lives. So I believe it's a topic is very critical.
In this case, you can go ahead and have a secured layer where your IoT devices, they themselves are collecting the data and keeping it there. And there is a segregation of network when we talk about the data being transmitted through APIs in pull or push mechanism, whatever it is, to the final SOC, which is security's NOC, what you're talking about in security centers. So your data is getting transmitted later, but your problem, I believe, in any kind of security center would be to go ahead and respond on a real time at any point in time when you can go ahead and reach out to that particular place, right? So that is one of the aspects which we can go ahead and look into, that how security can be managed. Plus, of course, if somebody is coming and connecting a device out there, that is still more secure and considered from the risk point of view when I do my risk analysis, rather than having a Bluetooth or a IEEE kind of a device connecting to those particular devices. So we try to go ahead and see those ports as well as those communications should not be allowed in any of those particular kind of IoT devices. So that is why my take on securing it by segregation of networks in when connecting to SOC or from security operations centers. That's how we do it usually in organizations also, and for data center as well as for our security NOC also we do it in this way.
I think just on the similar note, right? Kamal, you raised up a great point in terms of smart cities and making sure the IoT connectivity is kind of secure. Just to kind of elaborate, I think there was an attack which is known as the Workada attack. So Workada is basically a camera surveillance organization which was kind of compromised. It had a breach, and the hackers could literally access 100,000s or basically 200,000s of cameras all across the places which were installed. Those were located at high security areas, prisons, schools, hostels, and whatnot. So it becomes really critical to kind of, to your point, Kamal, right? In making sure who is able to access their data and how are we storing their data, which becomes, it can have a real big implications in terms of a smart cities projects which are already going on.
Yeah, speaking of how to store data, so one vital thing we actually need to consider is the data privacy law in each country, right? So we have the likes of Saudi that looks at the PDPL, with the likes of UK, GDPR. So when you're looking at data security entirely, you want to look at, okay, based on the data privacy laws in that country, how do you intend to store their data within the confinement of their country? And what that simply means is that you need to invest more, the organization needs to invest more to make sure that the data within that country is protected within that country.
So how do you plan to go ahead and regulate usage of IoT devices in your country at any point in time in future, because these are going to go ahead and grow in a very large quantity? Any regulations which are going to go ahead and try and see your regulatory body can bring in on picture where Nigeria or where other countries which are nearby can utilize it, concerned to 30141 which you were actually elaborating on?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So for Nigeria, we have the likes of GDPR, the data privacy law that speaks to how to protect data privacy for Nigerians. And so for big organization, right, that spans across different countries. So what that means is that you need to look at the data privacy laws within that country, within a particular country they're operating in, and which means it has to be different for every other country, all the countries you're operating in. And that brings to the point of you don't need to have just one policy, so that is not one shoes that fits the entire organization. So depending on the regulation or depending on the privacy law within the different countries you're operating in, you need to have specific policies for those countries.
Excellent. So
Excellent.
if Ravi would like to go ahead and implement
Excellent
a
conversation.
large-scale solution in
I just want to add something real quick.
Has to
Really
follow
quick. So we talked about cryptography, right? I just want to mention that AES isn't the only type of cryptography. There are thousands of types of cryptography. Just earlier, I was reading about elliptical curve cryptography. So, and otherwise, like, don't use the most standard one out there, because hackers are also working day and night to try to break it. So I mean, yeah. So and to go to Kamal's conversation about vehicles, a proposal would be, anybody can get a diagnostic tool and configure the ECUs for a vehicle however they want. So potentially, as vehicles are becoming more electric and they're becoming more software dependent on software based, having the cloud be the source of being able to configure anything in the vehicle, we can, some implementations could be to add expiration to whatever you send and add signing of configurations. That way, nobody, like not the general user, can insert whatever they think they want, or they think they want the vehicle to do. And I think that's a good ending note.
So continuing with that same discussion on autonomous vehicles, we talk about AutoSAR, right? When we go ahead and start designing something where we are controlling the engine, and when you go ahead and design some application for a touch screen and a dashboard in those new modern cars which are coming, whether it is electric or whether it is not, electric would add some more software related aspects to it. But now coming to that point, where you need to go ahead and segregate, as we are talking about segregation of networks, we are talking about now segregation of two different particular aspects. One is related to a mechanical working of the car, and the other one is the dashboard, which is giving you the information out of it, right? And analytics out of it on your dashboard at what speed you're running on it. Now what happens is that when you start integrating certain applications or software out there, automatically that dashboard becomes more vulnerable. So AutoSAR has its own security model. It will go ahead and do segregation at that particular end, if you look at it. Otherwise, somebody would easily go ahead and connect to it and can go ahead and tamper with your, mechanics while you are driving, and you might face an untoward incident out there. So that is where, security from the automobile perspective also, which I want to put, has standards, and they are very stringent standards. Nobody till now has been able to go ahead and break even in that particular market like AutoSAR has been doing. It's doing fantastic job with the security modules of that. I'm still, trying to gauge what exactly, our dear German brothers have made that AutoSAR from, kind of. So it's a serial bus kind of a communication, but then let's see, in future we might get a lot of different things coming up.
Actually, for the use cases, or for the which is already the vehicle manufacturer itself is providing the part of controlling the car, I believe it's less risk than any another use case. But now we are talking about already the new cars, and already it will be the evolution of to be already software-defined vehicles, which already it will be already sooner. But now there are a lot of use cases and demand in the market to convert the existing vehicles, which already mechanical one, to be a smart one. So here it's coming to have external devices with external already setup with the protocols to play the game of this role. So here it's risk itself. But regarding the automotive, if we are talking about BMW, Mercedes, whatever, they are playing great because they are already responsible for the stack starting from the vehicle itself till the software. The risk is coming already from the product. It's dealing with old cars. Here it's a very huge risk, and I think here it's already a security guys already enrolled to how we can make sure already everything is working fine, working with already a secure way. And we have a lot of discussions, I think, and a lot of corner cases happened before, so we can we can explore it more.
Explore it more, right? I mean, we have been discussing about a lot of industries out here, how security we can go ahead and take care of in IoT devices, but we did not pick up, banking and financial sector to be precise, where PCI DSS plays or PA DSS plays a very important part. We've got those devices also which are handheld devices, and then we have got, our mobility related applications. So it is a vast topic, when we talk about IoT, security, handheld devices, all those are also considered as something where, where we need to go ahead and make sure that transactions are going to get secured. So probably it's always a next time when we can go ahead and talk about it, but the forum is open for any questions or any suggestions from your side. Audience, we'd like to go ahead and put the floor open for all of us.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. There's been a lot of discussions which have happened around IoT in an office environment or probably in an automotive environment. But I would want to understand the view of this panel on IoT devices when it comes to home, just like your television or your refrigerator or even the one which is projecting, the projector. Right? Because a lot of things, when we are talking today, we have to talk, probably in the realm of cyber-physical security, right? How humans interact with IoT devices. And as an example, when we go back home, we probably use the same network where we are connecting our corporate devices and we are connecting these IoT devices also. So how does boosting data security in that environment, maybe some ideas from your side?
So the basics are very clear when we go ahead and talk about. We divide any kind of data into two different aspects. When I look at it from the security standpoint, I would also like Ravi to go ahead and pitch in about, because he is mostly dealing into video conferencing piece, where if we take that video conferencing IoT device at home and we are using it, then how does it work? And then in Cisco we have got IP phones, or Cisco is nowadays providing home related devices also where we can go ahead and do communication. So what we do is, as I said, we divide data into two different type of aspects when we talk about security, when we go ahead and try to secure them. Data at rest and data at net is very important. These are the two concepts which I don't see anywhere in my whole life will change ever. So data at rest, when we are talking about data at rest. Even if you go at the home, take your laptop back to home and you're working on your network using VPNs. But data at rest, when it is in your laptop, when it is in an IoT device, where you are touching it to start the fan, where you are touching it to go ahead and do video conferencing with that small device which is next to your switch, you would like to always go ahead and make sure that there is sufficient amount of encryption which is there, not only covering that particular data, but also the operating system which is being used at this point in time. So of course, so when you do encryption, we are talking about AES 256, which is still can be broken by quantum computing. As we have one of the specialists from Cisco who can go ahead and elaborate more on quantum computing right now. The second portion is of data at net. When that data is encrypted and it has to be passed to somebody else through a public internet where we are talking about. So then we have got protocols. We have got TLS 2.0 right now, which is in function. We have got HTTPS. We are using different kind of APIs directly to connect, which are secured. So all these kind of things would play a very important part. Piece by piece, all endpoints need to be secured. It cannot be a single phase, just that we are securing it through an encryption, but it has to be majorly everything which we have to go ahead and consider from the standpoint of when we are taking any of our laptops, IoT devices or handheld devices back home. So all those things play a very important part with segregation of data, segregation of network. How do you communicate from your home to your office, or from your home-based IoT device to the ultimately data where it is going to reside, or data where it is going to get transmitted to. So those two aspects will never change in my life, even if Web 3.0 comes in.
Yeah, just to quickly add there, I think the connection, right, at the device, at the time when you buy it and connect it to a particular system, I think there's a lot of technology that has been evolved there. Earlier, there used to be this default passwords and all that used to be there. Now they're kind of removing that, and they're all connected to your, you connect through your phone, through the Wi-Fi, through the phone, and things like that. I think that gives a lot of security, and the earlier devices didn't have, right? So I just tell you that there's a lot of advancements in the technology in the space, especially from a home IoT device connectivity connectivity side, and this whole connectivity that starts at the point when you purchase the device to you connect to a particular network or particular account of yours. I think that's where a lot of critical security aspects are taken care of.
So just to add to that, so I think recently we got, we just set up our Wi-Fi, right? And the technician asked us to put the password. So my husband puts just a couple of numbers there, right? So I was like, no, you can't put just numbers. You need to have complex passwords. So you can start with that, right? So number one, like he had said, you need to, for default password, just change all the default password. Then number two, make sure the password is complex enough so nobody, maybe your neighbors around have just simple tools, because we can download these simple tools from the internet and just simply, brute force your weak password. So setting complex password, change default passwords. Thank you.
So ISO 30141 has been released in 2018. There are some parts which are coming to it. But if I go back to ISO 27001, where we are talking about part B, where controls are there. So primarily, if IoT device is nothing but sometimes when you use an IoT device, you use a Unix-based system. In that IoT device is a skimmed version of an operating system to go ahead and project something or do some work for you from, creating an application so that you can have a touch screen. You click on that button, it starts your light. Now what you do is you ultimately follow the same rules. What you have to go ahead and do from the information security standpoint and those controls in the part B of ISO 27001, which is already available with us, part 2. So we need to go ahead and make sure firstly we have to go ahead and follow all those particular security best practices. Of course, pushing of patches is a very prominent part in IoT devices, because every time you'll see a new vulnerability comes up. So when you go ahead and make sure that the IoT devices, those millions of IoT devices are away from us, how do you have a patching mechanism which you have to take care of? So BAVA or VAPT, when you are doing any kind of patching for the application also, or you're releasing new releases. So all these things are a very critical part of it, which has to be controlled through some kind of a secure mechanism. That is where the second portion of the data which is going in and out on the network has to be secured. So I believe both these parts, as I said, data at rest and data at net, how do you do it, is very important from the security perspective. It will never change for the whole life. And I hope we answered some part of your question or fully.
No, that's again at the technology side. When I talk about cyber physical, there's a human element which comes into play. As an example, one of the casinos in Las Vegas was breached through a fish tank, through an aquarium, right? Or let's say there's a recent report I read where a lot of phishing emails came through a refrigerator connected to the internet. So what I'm saying is the home appliances play an equal or maybe a more important role when it connects to the corporate world. When we are talking about third-party risks, when you're talking about a connected world, right? So to basically segregate these two in today's borderless world which we are talking about, where data is everywhere, is probably, I feel, might not be the right approach. So yes, there are frameworks, but there are embedded systems as well, right? So if you're connecting, something which, when you're connecting your refrigerator as an IoT device, or probably the smart lights, these are embedded devices. A lot of things are not known about it. So how do you, basically address those risks? I'm talking about risk. Technology, yes, we are talking about encryption, tokenization, GDPR, we are talking about CCPA, we are talking about a lot of those regulations, standards, all that is fine. But what the need of the hour, the way I look at it is, how do we manage the weakest link, which is the physical element, the human element, rather than the technology element? And probably if you can shed a little bit more light on that, I would appreciate it.
So one very good point which you have brought in out here, it will bring me to a situation where, I personally use, what I personally do at my house. Now, a lot of people, all techies would like to get more speed. I want more speed. I'm working from home. It was COVID 2 years. But everybody was running over to those ISPs and then provide me a fastest bandwidth at my home, and then make sure, I have got a Wi-Fi network all across in my rooms. All my devices probably would be connected to that. So Wi-Fi, to be precise, is very vulnerable at any point in time. Keeping this in mind, I always try to go ahead and see if we can segregate communication of those devices to the IoT network, whichever is going to go ahead and give you the information. Now, what mistake as part of the attack which happened through through the refrigerator, or probably somebody would like to go ahead and use Hikvision cameras, which has a capability to go ahead and stream anything from internet, from public network to your mobile device also. So a techie or a person who is even if little bit of knowledge of security, would not like to go ahead and transmit any kind of information to his personal device which are more vulnerable from the physical aspects. Rather than that, it would only be used for point-to-point communication at any point in time. So what I did was, from my perspective, is all my devices were having communication through telecommunication related chips or numbers which we had, and we started using those mobile data rather than using a Wi-Fi network which goes through an ISP which is more vulnerable. Now these kind of things would actually go ahead and help you, is because only one device would get impacted if I'm connecting it to my laptop, if I'm connecting it to some other device. This is where, it is very important that embedded chips are also coming in certain devices, like in cars also they are not using any other kind of a public network rather than using a point-to-point communication from that car. This secures your physical devices from any kind of vulnerability. That is where Kamal said that what is the reach, that when you are reaching next to that particular car with 10 feet, 5 feet, then only you will be able to go ahead and operate on it. So you limit the area also for communication. So all those things actually create this ecosystem when you create of security around those. That is where you will benefit from security. There is no direct security measure which you can go ahead and implement it. Everything is vulnerable unless and until you go ahead and do a threat and vulnerability assessment. Unless and until somebody finds out that what is a loophole, you will never come to know about it. So continuously, that is why we suggest on any particular company, any particular compliance organization would keep on coming back to you on every quarter, do a risk analysis on top of it, and then provide you the information. There are very few organizations who are technically competent enough till in today's time to go ahead and analyze anything which is a vulnerability from the IoT, because it's a very new market which is budding up for the home appliances, home computers. But common public will never understand it. They will go ahead and connect all their devices to one, and they will go ahead and stream that particular data on their mobility devices or try to control it from there, which will make him more vulnerable, because you will never be able to go ahead and secure your mobility device. So that will be a very difficult task. That is why segregating them, keeping them to the nearest range when you are operating them is a better idea, I would suggest. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. If you do have any more questions for our panel, I'm sure they won't mind discussing any topics you have with them at the lunch break for the networking. We are just running out of time. We just need to make sure that we keep onto our time here. But thank you so much for that eye-opening session. And we're going to move on now. We're just going to reset the stage. And we're going to talk next about cloud computing. And as technology continues to evolve at lightning speed, it's no surprise that cloud computing has been at the forefront of this movement. And while we've made significant progress, it's clear that there's a lot more work still left to be done. So we're going to move on to a fireside chat next, ladies and gentlemen. And then after this, we're going to have our awards session. Then we're going to take a break for lunch.